In the heart of ancient Greece, where the echoes of gods and monsters mingled with the whispers of the wind, there was a creature so fearsome that its name alone sent shivers down the spine. Born of divine wrath, a symbol of power and dread woven into the fabric of myth. Among the Gorgons, one name stands out above the rest: Medusa. Her story, tragic and terrifying, began not in the dark chasms of myth, but in the sacred halls of the goddess Athena. Medusa was once a priestess, sworn to a life of chastity and devotion. Her beauty was unmatched, a blessing that turned heads and caught the eye of gods and mortals alike. She was known for her radiant hair, a cascade of golden locks that shone with the light of the sun, and eyes as deep and mysterious as the sea itself. Medusa's fate changed when Poseidon, god of the seas, set his gaze upon her. Some say it was a moment of love, others say it was an act of violent desire, but what is certain is that Medusa's defilement in Athena's sacred temple would seal her destiny. The goddess, enraged at this violation, did not spare the maiden's life. Instead, she transformed Medusa into a creature feared by all monsters, whose very gaze turned the living to stone. This was not an act of blind cruelty, but a punishment imbued with meaning. Athena's wrath was a reminder of the sanctity of her domain and the consequences of defiling it. Yet the transformation was not just retribution. It was a curse that turned a once beautiful woman into a living embodiment of terror. Medusa's hair, once flowing with beauty, became a mass of serpents, hissing and snapping. Her eyes, once kind and full of life, now held the power to petrify anyone who dared look directly at them. The world recoiled in horror, for Medusa was no longer a maiden but a monster cast into the darkness of the unknown. Medusa's new form was both a curse and a power. She became the subject of countless tales and the focus of the fearful and the curious. It was said that even the bravest warriors could not help but tremble when they heard the hiss of serpents or felt the icy chill of her gaze. In the dark corners of the world, sailors whispered about distant islands where the winds carried the scent of death and the sounds of hissing serpents. Many claimed to have seen glimpses of Medusa. Others spoke of being driven mad by the sheer dread of her presence. But not all who spoke of Medusa spoke only with fear. Some saw her as a symbol of defiance, a creature who embodied the consequences of divine anger and the pain of unjust punishment. Her image began to appear in art and on shields, not only as a reminder of terror but as a powerful symbol of protection. The Gorgon's head became a talisman said to ward off evil and bring victory in battle. It was as though Medusa, even in her monstrous form, retained an echo of her former beauty and grace, a reminder that she was not born evil, but was shaped into something monstrous by the gods' will. Legends tell of sailors who would alter their course to avoid the sight of her, of warriors who dared to seek her out but were never seen again. The stories grew darker as time passed, whispering of those who gazed into her eyes and were turned to stone, their expressions frozen in an eternal scream. It was said that the gaze of Medusa could pierce the veil of life itself, that those who saw her would lose all hope, their souls trapped in the marble tombs of their own bodies. It was this legacy of power and horror that drew the attention of Perseus, a hero of great cunning and ambition. He was the son of Zeus and Danae, a mortal woman who had been cast into a dark chamber by her father, King Acrisius, in an attempt to thwart a prophecy. But Zeus, drawn by her beauty, had visited her in a rain of gold, and Perseus was born. From the start, his life was one of destiny and divine favor, but even he could not have known that it would lead him to the lair of the Gorgon.
Guided by the gods themselves, I was given gifts: a reflective shield from Athena, a sword of celestial bronze-winged sandals from Hermes, and a helm of invisibility from Hades. Each gift was a tool to help me defeat the monster, but they were also a testament to the will of the gods, a reminder that even heroes are pawns in the schemes of divine beings.
Perseus ventured into the dark and rocky lair of the Gorgon, where the air was thick with the stench of serpents and the silence of the damned. He had been warned that any who looked directly at Medusa would be lost to her gaze forever, and so he kept his eyes fixed on the polished surface of his shield, careful not to glimpse her directly. The shield was not just a mirror. It was a piece of the goddess's will, reflecting not just light, but truth.
I moved through the cave, where the walls were slick with moisture and the echoes of serpents' hiss mingled with the sound of the wind. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper, as though the very earth was holding its breath. As I neared the lair, I could see the silhouette of Medusa's form, coiled and waiting, her serpents twitching with a life of their own.
The creature's eyes were wide, unblinking, their gaze a promise of death to any who dared to meet them. Medusa's lair was a place of nightmares, a dark, twisted realm where light dared not touch. Perseus's eyes reflected her monstrous form, the wide, unblinking eyes, the serpents writhing in fury, their fangs bared and tongues flicking in anticipation. Yet despite the terror that coiled around him like the serpents at her feet, he pressed on, knowing that he must strike or be struck down. Medusa's gaze met the reflection in the shield, and in that moment the beast seemed to pause, a flicker of something akin to recognition in her eyes. Perhaps she saw not just an adversary, but the embodiment of her own suffering, a hero whose victory would be built on her ruin. With a swift, practiced movement, Perseus raised his sword, the blade gleaming in the dim light. The final strike was quick, decisive. The blade sliced through her neck, severing the bond between life and death. The cave fell silent as Medusa's body crumpled to the ground, the serpent's hissing dying away into an eerie stillness.
I stood there, breathless as the weight of my victory pressed upon me. Yet in that moment I could feel the echo of her tragedy, the heavy reminder that Medusa had once been a woman with hopes, dreams, and a life stolen by the capricious whims of gods.
The head of Medusa, severed but still bearing the power to turn those who gazed upon it to stone, became a trophy of incredible power. Perseus took it with him, not as a symbol of conquest, but as a reminder of the cost of divine vengeance and the thin line between hero and monster. The head was said to be both a weapon and a curse, a relic that could protect or destroy, depending on the heart of the wielder. Even in death, Medusa's essence lingered, a symbol of both terror and power. I used the head in battles, wielding it to turn my enemies into stone and secure the safety of those who could not protect themselves. But it was also said that I could not look upon it without a shudder, knowing that the creature I had defeated had once been more than a monster. She had been a woman, a priestess who had known love and betrayal, who had been punished for something that was not entirely her fault. The legacy of Medusa lived on, not just in tales of heroism and monster slayings, but as a warning, a reminder that even gods can be cruel, and that those who suffer at their hands may become the very things they fear. Medusa's story carried with it the notion that beauty and power could turn to monstrosity at the whims of fate, that even innocence could be twisted into something formidable and feared. The Gorgon, once a maiden whose fate was sealed by the gods, became an eternal part of the mortal world, a reminder of the fine line between victim and monster, and the tragedy that can befall even the most beautiful and devout. Medusa's legacy is not just one of terror, but of a haunting reminder that sometimes the greatest monsters are not born, but made.